Good morning, my name is Konrad Jagodziński. I'm the Place Branding Director here at Brand Finance. I'm going to be leading today's proceedings, so I'm afraid you'll have to be looking at my face probably more often than you're prepared to. Brand Finance has started in 1996 with the aim of bridging the gap between marketing and finance. And 20 years ago, we also started looking at nation brands. And this year, we're celebrating the 20th Nation Brands ranking and the 5th Global Soft Power Index, which will be launched officially tomorrow. Today, we're focusing on a program of workshops, sharing best practice between nation brand leaders from around the world who have come here today. Thank you all for coming, especially those of you who have flown in to London yesterday and the days before to join the conference. Without further ado, I will hand over to David Haigh, Chairman and CEO of Brand Finance, and Mr. Puneet Chhatwal, Managing Director and CEO of IHCL, Indian Hotels Company Limited.
Thank you. For any of you, thank you. For anyone who's standing at the back, as always, the front row is empty. So if you want to get a ringside seat, you can come down in the front. Thank you, Conrad. And here's my welcome to our 5th annual Soft Power Summit. As Conrad said, this year we've added a whole day of workshops. I think we all like the research that we announce tomorrow and the keynote speakers who tend to be quite high-level political speakers. And we felt it would be good to have something that was a bit more nitty-gritty to get into the weeds of how soft power can actually affect the economic development of countries. So I'm looking forward to seeing that throughout the day. Today we'll be investigating, just how good campaigns have worked, and then at the end of the day, we're going to have a brief presentation of some of the winners, some of the highlight winners, and it won't be arbitrary decisions by Brand Finance. It comes from the research itself. So there will be a brief presentation ceremony at the end of the day, followed by drinks sponsored by our friends from Wines of Moldova. So I hope many of you will stay to sample the delights. To kick off, I'd like to focus on India. India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Quite often it's forgotten just how fast growing it is because people talk about China the whole time. This year, its growth is more than 7%. Last year, it was, I think, nearly 7%. It's absolutely in boom mode, and it looks set to continue in that way. In our research, which is obviously perceptual, India already does pretty well. It's in the top 20 position for quite a few things, certainly familiarity, influence, also future growth potential, which I suppose is fairly obvious given that growth. Technology and innovation, which I think most people would recognize, science again, but also arts, food, and heritage. So it's in the top 20 for many of our measures. However, India still has some way to go to fully exploit its inherent strengths, in my opinion. And overall, I think it comes, I've forgotten the exact number, it's around about 28 or 30 in our table in terms of overall soft power. So there's certainly a little bit of work to do. But it's interesting if you contrast that. If you look at India, it is the most populous country in the world, so it's number 1 for people. And I think India is known for having very good quality people, which is why it is so successful at things like software, IT services, and many other industries. So huge population with great potential there. Its economy is already the 5th in the world. So it's only behind US, China, Japan, and Germany, and ahead of the UK, and powering away from the UK. Now, one of the downsides to that actually is that the per capita GDP is quite low. I think it's around about number 150 in the world. It's only $2,500 per person, whereas here in the UK, it's more like 50,000. So I think you can see the huge growth potential for India if it gets things right. The other thing, actually, we're talking about soft power, but in terms of hard power, India is actually the 2nd largest army in the world. It is a very formidable hard power country. So it's formidable from hard power, it's formidable economically and growing. The area which needs a little bit of help is soft power development, in our opinion. It needs a concerted effort to raise that soft power. And the question is, well, what can be done and what can organizations from India do to help? Which is why I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Puneet Chhatwal, who's the CEO of International Hotel Company Limited, IHCL, which was founded by Shamjedji, sorry, I can't pronounce it, Mr. Tata, who founded the Tata Group back in 1903. It's over 120 years old. It's an amazing institution. It's one of the leading hotel companies in the world. In fact, according to Brand Finance's research, we place it as the Ferrari of hotel brands. It ranks as the strongest hotel brand in all of our tables, though not necessarily the most valuable hotel brand. So, as we always used to say with Ferrari, it isn't the most valuable car brand, but it is the strongest. And that is what we say about Taj and the IHCL group. In addition to that, it is the strongest brand in India, and it has 260 hotels, 10 billion of capital value, 35,000 staff. It's in 11 countries. So it's a formidable vehicle for actually promoting India, and it represents the best of India. So we'll begin today with a short address by Mr. Chhatwal, and then I'll ask him a few questions. So without further ado, I will hand to Mr. Chhatwal. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the nice introduction. So basically what David said, we are just at the beginning of a very good period ahead of us. We have not yet been able to exploit the full potential because of the lack of soft power. So, put it in very brief, one could say the best is yet to come. And it's like that in life. You know, who would have thought India becomes the 5th largest economy in this last 5, 7, 8, 10 years? And as per all the pundits, gurus of economics, in the next 6 years, it should become the 3rd largest economy in the world. So, and all this is a journey that India embarked upon, but it's no surprise because India got independence only 75 years ago. And all the strategies in India are built around 100 years, which will be India at 2047. So a lot of work is happening, but 1.4 billion people in a federal structure, in a democracy, it takes time, especially if the per capita income is low. The needs and wants of people are very different. So the gap will keep narrowing. And a lot that has happened, which I would just touch base on, is India's recent landing with Chandrayaan on the moon, because in Hindi, the moon is called Chandrama, so that's why it was named Chandrayaan. The Mangalayaan on the Mars, and the latest mission, Aditya, to the sun. Creation of vaccine at the peak of COVID, supplying it to so many countries in the world. These are things which were unimaginable till maybe even 10 years ago, that India would be in a position to do that. And last year, India had the presidency of G20, and the theme was One Earth, One Family, and One Future. So I think politically, financially, from a growth perspective, India's done pretty well. And that's for maybe tomorrow the political leaders to talk more about that. But it has remained unaffected in its own relationships with all countries, and it's not impacted by conflict, whether it's in the Middle East or it's in the European territories. So I think all in all, ease of doing business has improved a lot. The GDP growth is set to remain around 7%, and continuous innovation and technological advancements are going to come from India. Now, what David could not pronounce, I am well trained to pronounce. Tata Group was formed by Jamshedji Tata, and this was 155 years ago. It's the most important group, not only in India, but one of the most important groups in the world. 66% shareholding is with the trust, and for 155 plus years, consistently, the monies that are earned by different companies, which is 150 billion plus in revenue per year from different Tata Group companies with a market cap of $350 billion plus, rising every day. all goes back to the society, because Jamshedji Tata said, the community is not just another stakeholder, rather the purpose of the existence of any business. So this statement is in all Tata Group companies, whether it's Tata Consultancy, Tata Motors, which incidentally owns JLR for some time now, Jaguar Land Rover, Tata Steel, and many, many other companies. They are guided by this philosophy of everything happens in and around the communities you live in and communities you're supposed to serve. And that is somehow inculcated in each company's own ethos and pathos and in their purpose statement. So I sometimes laugh about it. I said, we start putting purpose in companies' strategies very recently, maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. But Mr. Tata defined purpose more than 150 years ago, and that's the ethos we remain guided by. Within the Tata Group, when it started, many companies have also shut down because they were not relevant anymore. But the oldest operating company is the Hotels Company, which was founded in 1903, followed by Tata Steel to build the nation in 1907. Then came the Indian Institute of Science in 1909, and then further with power and other businesses, 1915 onwards. So more or less all the companies and all the things that I mentioned are more than 100 years old. 1903 was the opening of Taj Mahal Palace in Colaba, that's South Mumbai. How many are familiar with Taj Mahal Palace? Any people? Well, it's a temple of hospitality, what we call. We just celebrated 120 years of Taj with that. It's a very iconic brand. It boasts of the best safaris in India, the best palaces, which we also call the living legacies of the Taj, the real palaces of Maharajas and Maharanas converted into palatial experience, whether it's in the middle of the lake in Udaipur or the current TripAdvisor #1 hotel of the world, that's the Rambagh Palace in Jaipur, or previously the Umaid Bhavan Palace in Jodhpur as the TripAdvisor #1 hotel of the world and of Asia. So all in all, I think Taj is really one brand from India that has made it globally. It's also on the Fifth Avenue with the pier in New York. It's right here next to Buckingham Gate, with residences in Buckingham Gate and the Hotel St. James Court. And the journey keeps going on internationally also. So in a portfolio of almost 300 hotels, 100 plus is Taj, which ranks it also in terms of scale among the topmost luxury brands in the world. The other hotel brands that we have, they are still in a growth phase. They're not anymore in an infancy, but in a growth phase. And hopefully they will become institutions like the Taj has become with a century of its history. Other than that, I think even within Taj, very interesting for all of you would be the core values that we are guided by. And we define that very importantly because we all keep changing business strategies. Business strategy pre-COVID, strategy during COVID, a strategy post-COVID. But what does not change, although change is the only constant in our lives, is your core values. The core values don't change every 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. So we define Taj as trust, awareness, and joy. Trust of all our stakeholders, awareness of the communities we live in, and joy in doing whatever we do. And so coupled with the Tata values, we have 5 core values of Tata, the guiding purpose statement of the founder, and our own values has created a very strong fundament for growth, for prosperity, for what is the theme of the summit, the soft power. If there is one brand which has soft power, which is in line with what India has been talking about, made in India, and including heal in India and wed in India. Now the Prime Minister said all weddings should happen in India, and then the healing with the Ayurveda and the healing with all the other therapies, the medical tourism. In all these touch points, if there is one brand that plays an important role on the Indian subcontinent, then it is the Taj. And if there is one brand which people were asked by the branding gurus, whether prompted or unprompted awareness, just name us a brand from India. So I think of late one would say a brand name like Modi, but previously one would have said Gandhi and Taj. So whether they referred to the Taj Mahal in Agra or the Taj brand, and when we had the terror attack of 26/11, it is not called the terror attack like the 9/11. India had its 26/11. It's not called an attack on India, it's called the attack on Taj, because the Taj, the old palace, and the new tower in Mumbai was taken over by the terrorists for a day and a half and so. So I think the rest we can have in a Q&A, but just like a brief intro, and thank you for allowing that. And I know that we fumbled with ICHL and IHCL. It's actually IHCL, which is Indian Hotels Company Limited. That's how Jamshedji called it, because he wanted a hotel for the Indians. And at that time, India was not independent, and Indians were not allowed to go into hotels. So that's the little secret behind why it is called Indian Hotels Company, and has been there with 122 AGMs that have happened. Thank you very much.
Are the mics working? Okay. Well, apologies for the fumbled descriptions. Brand finance has actually been in India for over 20 years. And fairly early on, we got to know the Tata Group and the Taj within it. And the thing that always struck me was that it's a world-class company that isn't necessarily known well enough around the world. 20 years later, I think it's a lot better known than it was, but it could still be better known than it is, and certainly its leading position in terms of sustainability and ESG. Tata is a very, what should we say, modest company. It doesn't necessarily go out and brag about its ethos, doesn't brag about its values. And so the question really is, what are the Indian values and the Tata Taj values? Well, you've already mentioned them yourself, but what more could be done to use those values to help develop India as a soft power, where it clearly is lagging from our research because people are not aware in the same way that I was not aware. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think David very rightly said, I joined the group 6.5 years ago, and I said a lot more than anybody would say. I was there 30 years in the shareholding, and then there is a trust and the money goes back to the society. This is not a part of the culture, as you said rightly, to brag about what you do. You just do it. And I don't know what happens, your DNA gets impacted. So when COVID came and there was a lockdown, so revenues in the hotel sector went from whatever it was to zero. And we did not lay off any staff. Actually, for the first time in my life, I heard the term furloughing of people. So because in India, if you take away that, you take away lives and livelihoods. There is no support system from the government that you're going to get some unemployment insurance amount, or there is going to, healthcare will be taken care of. At the same time, the group was doing a lot to help fight COVID, but within our little means, we opened our flight kitchens to provide meals to the frontline workers. And this was 6 million meals, because there was also no transportation. The nurses and the doctors were not able to go back home. And even if they went, they were not very welcome because they had worked with COVID-impacted patients. I'm just giving this as an example. And we hosted 120,000 bed nights because people were not able to go home. And what it did, when COVID was on and people's children were coming back from UK or US, wherever they were studying, and had to go for quarantine, the first choice of every parent was that they stay at the Taj. Because Tata Group's, one of the key messages in the statement, the purpose statement, is leadership with trust. And one of the key core values of Taj is also trust. And this creates a kind of a trust and bond that has helped in creating the brand name and the value. And I would just call it, it's not just a hotel brand, it's an emotion. Taj is not just another name, it's an emotion for 1.4 billion people, and it's aspirational. You know how important weddings are in India. So especially the daughter's wedding. So for every father, it's aspirational that the daughter gets married at the Taj, whichever city or place it might be. Now, we have not been able to do a lot of that internationally because the world got carried away by scale. Thinking, you know, somebody who has more rooms and more hotels is obviously a better brand or a larger group, and somehow that is still carried on. I think our position and strategy remains selective. We think for the next 50 years and 100 years, we will keep putting those dots on the map and keep, you know, introducing our culture that we call Tajness to the other parts of the world, including in other cities. The time has come to do that in other provincial towns of the UK, especially those which have strong Indian diaspora, with a conviction. Because I don't believe hope is a strategy. I think we are convinced that through our service, through our food, through the heritage, 30 different Indian cuisines plus the rest of the world would help to spread that message rather rapidly than we have been able to do in the last 30, 40 years. So that time is there because we are doing well. Our sector is doing well. All hotel companies are doing well. We're making lots of money. And now time has come to reinvest some of it.
So do you think, to a Western eye, I think the view is if you've got it, flaunt it and promote what you're doing and let people know. Is it more of an Indian way to let the actions do the talking? And even if it takes longer, it's better to do it that way?
Yeah, that is what I see some people of Indian origin in the crowd, and it's a very age-old saying, which is karmanne vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You know, just keep doing your karma, and the results will follow.
So one of the things we were talking about last night was there are a lot of very successful Indian companies, but they're not necessarily pulling their weight the way that Tata and Taj are to raise the image and soft power profile of India. Do you think there are other brands in India that could be doing more to sort of elevate pride and soft power?
Absolutely. I think the Indian economy has done well, but there are brands, I would not name them, but there are brands in, I would say, two-wheelers, you know, like a scooter or a motorbike. There are brands in consumer business, which could do very well outside of India. Now, they are doing well in certain pockets. Some are doing well in Africa, some are doing well in US. A jewelry brand within the Tata Group is beginning to grow very strong in international business. And I think that thought process has not been there. You know, Tata is establishing a multi-billion electronics project in the UK, very recently announced, or helping support Jaguar Land Rover through the worst of its times, right? And positioning it, and with the change in the branding, the logo, everything has changed, is a good example of the resilience of the group, and through good and through bad times. And I think it will follow. The way India is changing, and the speed of the change is such that the rest should follow in the last, you know, not in the last 5 years, but in the coming 5 to 10 years, you will see that difference.
I mean, you mentioned Mr. Modi, and he clearly is promoting India in a very strong way. What we've noticed, actually, is that quite a lot of Indian companies would rather be positioned as global or international than necessarily flaunt their Indianness. Whereas if you look at some sectors like software and IT services, India is clearly the leading country in the world. All the players, including Accenture and so on, that are ostensibly based in America or Europe, are very largely dominated by Indian people. So it's an Indian industry, but yet you wouldn't necessarily know. Do you think they ought to be a bit more out there about that?
I would say yes, because I spent almost 3 decades living in Europe, so I would say yes, but that's not the Indian way, definitely not the Tata way. But one thing we have to give credit to Mr. Modi. You know, I don't know how many of you see pictures of the G7 and G20 leaders. I mean, what I had never seen before was, you know, shakes hand and then a big hug follows, right? So it's the hugging between the heads of states of the world, and this is very Indian. So I think this hugging is an Indian brand.
Interesting. So,
and has a lot of soft power.
Remind me to hug you at the end. So you spent years in Germany. I mean, does India have anything to learn from Germany, or is it the other way around?
Yes, you can. I think, firstly, you can learn from all cultures. So that's, you know, I spent time also in Paris. Half my time was in Paris, Brussels, and the other half in Germany. But when you want perfection and quality, we always relied on German products. And that comes because the attention and eye to detail, and that's your power of the brands. The brands are not built that way. Brands also have to be very reliable. And I think that is one thing which one can learn from Germany is the quality of the Autobahn or the high-speed trains and things that they even put in China, the magnet train, which takes you from Shanghai airport to Shanghai town, is this very high quality technology and execution with perfection. What Germany could learn is also the soft power of hugging.
Right. So one of the things we talked about was the Commonwealth. Britain obviously thinks that it leads the Commonwealth, but if you look at the facts, India is really the leader of the Commonwealth, has by far the biggest population, biggest economy, biggest army. It's hopefully just about to get into the Security Council. Do you think that's something that India can leverage, and should it have that Security Council position and so on?
I think when you are growing and aspiring to be number 5, and then you're aspiring to be number 3 and higher, you have to leverage everything that you can. And Commonwealth is an important part of the DNA of India. Actually, very interestingly, the second most important event that I got trained in as a student of a hotel school, the first was Asian Games in '82, and the second one was the non-aligned meet, which is the Commonwealth nations in 1983. And I had that privilege and honor of meeting so many heads of states and, working, even overhearing the conversations, because that's what happens when you're serving people. You can't close your ears, right? So it was a lovely exposure, and I think it's something very special and unique. And India has the ability, capability, and now even the resources to drive the Commonwealth to a very different level. It's already at a great level, but you have to keep doing to stay great and greater and the greatest, right?
So I've got one last question, so we can move on with the agenda. It's 10 years from now, where will India be, and where will the Taj Group be?
Well, India, I think we have to look at what all the IMF and everybody else is saying. I think if the last 5 years is some evidence of what India has done, then let's say in the next 6 years, India could be the 3rd largest economy of the world, with rising per capita income, a great place to visit from a tourism perspective. From the Himalayas in the north to the coast where we have Kerala, which is the backwaters of Kerala, which we call the God's own country, and the beaches of Goa, and the temples and the spiritual tourism, very, very strong. All religions, it does not matter which one, the churches, the mosques, the temples, whether it's even the Parsi temples. So I think all in all, India is in a good space. But what is more important for me is the Taj. And I think we are definitely aspiring, ambitious, and planning to be the best international luxury brand, not necessarily in terms of having 500 more hotels, that's not what I'll say, but if we add strategic dots on the map, whether it's 10 or 15 or 20 in key gateway markets, that will create the foundation for the next 120 years, and also a great journey like the last 120 years have been.
Well, thank you very much for giving your time up. We're definitely going to be looking to see how India does, and my anticipation is it is actually going to accelerate in our research. So we'll come back next year and see how it's doing.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I thought David promised a hug, but okay.
Go on then.
Thank you very much, David and Mr. Chhatwal from IHCL. And now, without further ado, I'll hand over to Janina Warren, lecturer in place branding from Middlesex University, who has pioneered a program in place branding, an MA program, the students of which are here with us today as well, so welcome. And please take over. There is a clicker through here.
Can I see that on the screen there? There we go. Hello. Thank you for having me, Brand Finance. I really appreciate the opportunity. As Conrad said, my name is Janina Warren, and I'm a senior lecturer at Middlesex University. And I have pioneered the world's first master's degree in place branding at Middlesex. And so today is a little bit of a taster session, pretending you are all students on my class, potentially, and we're going to have a little lecture. But what I really want to do is I want to sort of take the conversation about soft power, which is very global and very macro in scale, and potentially go down to a micro level. And I know in the room today we have a lot of professionals working in diplomacy, embassy, soft power, place marketing, DMOs, etc. And what I want to do is I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your role and how important it is, and how if we start thinking about the role of place branding and the role of place marketers in the policy value chain, how can we actually better unpack what that role actually looks like and its actually import? Because at the end of the day, my main argument is that as place marketers, we are undermined and undervalued. And what we need to do is we need to work harder at making sure that we're elevated and we're centralized in policy value chains within nation and city and regional marketing processes, because I think we have a really powerful role to play. So what I really want to talk about is sort of framing this idea of sort of, are we the Machiavellis of today? We all know who Machiavelli was, and he's known for sort of underhanded and sort of manipulative forces at work in the political realm. And as much as this is sort of a provocation, I want us to sort of think about maybe some of the non-systemic and unofficial ways that place marketers actually operate and the influence and impact that they can have. Maybe not thinking of it in terms of diabolical sort of ways of manipulation, but maybe in terms of thinking about the way that you can actually do your jobs in a way to have bigger impact. So what I want to talk about today is the people, you, me, and my students, future students, the processes, the particularities, and also the invisibility and influence and impact of the job. So I'm not sure if you can see this because it's behind me on the lectern, but those in the back potentially. In order to kind of ground this debate, what I want to start with is this idea that we live in a promotional culture. What that means is that everything that we see, hear, taste, touch, smell is touched by a promotional logic. Everything in the world now thinks of itself as promotionally, not least place. And this is obviously evidenced by the scale of an event like this, where we talk about soft power and we talk about how places, nations, regions, countries, cities are seeing themselves promotionally and starting to position themselves in competition with others. Therefore, what that means is that there's been a rise of what's needed called promotional intermediaries. What this means is that there's a lot more people doing these jobs. There's a lot more need for people to do these jobs, working in marketing communications and actually expanding this sort of rapidly dynamic field to actually embed themselves in the processes of place, which, if you think about it, is a fairly new concept, because places used to just exist for people as a place to sort of live and work, but now that there's this whole layer of promotional thinking that is involved, there's this whole new layer of occupations that now exist to have to promote those places and do those jobs. What this means is that these promotional intermediaries have a big role to play in terms of thinking about audiences and channels and messages and how those things go together. And then also, what my argument is ultimately the stories that get told about a place start to become its reality. And so if we start to think about it from this lens, we can see that this is actually quite a powerful role to play. Now, this also comes from this notion of sort of selling subjectivity. Now, I've got a picture here of a mythical Toronto, which is where I'm from. I spent 6 years at Toronto City Hall managing major international PR campaigns, city branding campaigns, and promotional campaigns for major festivals and events before I moved to the UK to do a master's degree and a PhD in place branding and start a new career as an academic. And this notion of the creative city or the rise of the creative class, or even this idea of soft power and cultural diplomacy, all of these emerging sort of elements that have risen over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, means that we're starting to think about cities and places in terms of subjective concepts, right? It's about the value that those places bring, the experience of being there. So it's not just about sort of hard assets and hard metrics. It's really about vibe and feeling, culture and creativity. And so those subjective soft assets become a little bit sort of embedded in what the brand strategy is. And what that means is that the people who do that work have a really big role to play in terms of telling that story about the subjectivity, about actually what that means to be there. Now, I've got a list here of the various different jobs or locations where these people might work. And hopefully most of you will see yourselves in this list. I won't go through it exhaustively, but we do know that there is now a tranche of professionals working at ministerial level, regional level, departmental level, in regions, cities, and countries, inside government as well as outside government. There's also this massive increase of agencies who are actually working and representing clients and doing this work. And then there's also a whole tranche of people working in consultancies as well. And then placemaking has also sort of emerged as a major professional milieu as well. Now, the professions themselves, what I'm talking about is anybody working in marketing, sales, PR, sort of the more direct marketing type of functions around digital and social media engagement. But also there's this whole other sort of realm around stakeholder engagement and community relations, as well as certainly embassies and diplomacy. So again, we need to start thinking about the fact that these people, you, are working in all kinds of different places. And the most important thing here is that brand is rarely actually in the title of the job itself. But what these jobs all have in common is that they think promotionally or they think communicatively. So they're working in that realm. But you won't find necessarily brand manager in the title, except for a few places that are sort of on the cutting edge where they are hiring brand managers. The job still is promotional and still is branding, but not necessarily called that. Now, where does this operate? These are the products. Again, everywhere you can think of where a place is represented. This is going to be in policy briefings, in speeches. It's going to be in all kinds of traditional as well as social media channels, paid, earned, and owned media, websites, etc., as well as anything that relates sort of to the private sector, tourism and hospitality, and then anything that comes from private-public partnerships, and certainly all of the language of diplomacy. My argument is that the work of these people, the work that I used to do, is behind the scenes on all of this. Somehow, somewhere, someone with a communication lens, a marketing lens, or promotional lens is impacting these products in this language. And what this means is that we can start to position these people as sort of residing at the nexus between what reality is and what people perceive reality to be. And this is important because, again, this is that intermediary function where people are operating behind the scenes, not necessarily out in front, but they are having a big impact on how the story of a place is told. Now, it's a very particular job, and this is why we created a master's degree in this field, is because this is not your regular product marketing job. You can't just go and get an MBA or a bachelor's of marketing or take some marketing courses and understand how it works. Marketing brands and product and managing brands is very different than managing a place brand. And so what this means is that this really requires, on behalf of professionals, a very holistic and multifaceted understanding of the nuances of that place. It also means that there's a major expectation to adapt to social, cultural, and environmental objectives, not just financial and economic ones. It also means that practitioners need a wide range of transferable skills in marketing, leadership, and diplomacy, and it's very complex and challenging to navigate the wide sort of range of stakeholders as well as brand touch points. And hopefully most of you in the room can kind of start to see that, yes, this is actually the particularities of this job. This is what makes it different than any sort of product job you may have had in the past. But there's some paradoxes that come with this as well, and this is what makes the job really challenging. First is that you have to balance this private sector discipline with public sector accountability. This is very challenging, especially in an environment where there are tax cuts, or where there's austerity, or where there's, obviously it's a very politically charged environment, and yet you're beholden to uphold the principles of what you're doing, but you have that responsibility to the public sector as well. It's politically contingent. You have to be involved in the political processes, and yet a good place brand is going to actually transcend political cycles and should transcend political cycles. But how do you do that when you're working so closely with the political class? And then finally, it's driven by economic considerations of economic impact, GDP, and growth, but it's also judged on social value like well-being and livability. So how do you balance those things when you're working in a marketing of a place like this? I would also say that, what my research has pointed to, and I have interviewed hundreds of marketing professionals around the world, all over in the last 10 years, and what keeps coming up over and over again is this fact that the job is fairly undermined and invisible. So you're working very hard, bringing in strategic processes, and yet a lot of the times you're getting told, well, just make me a brochure. Can you just make it pretty, right? Write me a press release. These are our policies, now we need you to market them. And it's very much an add-on after the fact kind of expectation. And even when I went diving into the academic literature on place branding, it talked a lot about how this was actually simply a commodification of place. How can you market or how can you brand a place? It's impossible. That's thinking about a place in two dimensions. It's too dynamic. It's impossible to overlay a brand onto a place. And it's just, it's nothing more than sort of PR hacks and spin doctors. And so there's been quite, over the last sort of decade, as this field has emerged and risen in global scale, has come the critics along with it. But my argument here is that this work is not rational or neutral, but actually it relies very heavily on the personal and subjective investment of social and cultural capital, as well as performances of legitimacy. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to try to go quickly because I know we're running out of time. But what I want to talk about is this idea of symbolic power. Because actually, what happens in these roles is that you do have a lot of power, but it's not necessarily named. And so what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a framework called cultural intermediation, where basically we can talk about the fact that it's not Machiavellian manipulation necessarily, but it's cultural intermediation. And this is a really important academic theory that was introduced by a sociologist named Bourdieu in the 80s, a French sociologist who talked about power in society. He talked about who are the people who have power but aren't necessarily in positions of named power. So they don't necessarily have economic value, or they're not necessarily holding positions of political power, but yet they have symbolic power. And how do they do that? Well, he referred to people who work in advertising, marketing, graphic design, fashion, etc., as people who have a lot of power over telling the story about how the world we see it exists. They help us understand the world that we live in through narration and storytelling overall. And they are arbiters of taste, style, and function. They tell us what we should pay attention to. They tell us what's cool. And so what they do is they leverage social capital, the people that they know. They leverage cultural capital, the things that they know, and they leverage the habitus, the people that they are, to actually build that type of power and create a legitimacy for their function. So this is just a very brief sort of framework where it shows basically that the cultural capital, habitus, and social capital are occupational resources. And in a city branding context, this is where these people operate. They operate in different fields: the political field, the public sector field, tourism, hospitality, food, beverage, etc. And what I want to talk about specifically right now is the fact that social capital is probably the most important occupational resource you have. The relationships you own, the networks you exist in, and the way that you operate within the fields of the various areas of the city, I would argue nobody else in the policy value chain holds as many relationships as the marketers. Because if you look at it, they are working internationally, nationally, and very locally, as well as politically, personally, and professionally. And they have to hold many, many, many relationships. They are the ones that have their finger on the pulse of all of these relationships, and they have the power to actually bring these very disparate groups of people together to work together. They have direct contact with stakeholders, but their relationships tend to be unofficial, non-systemic, and kind of behind the scenes. Now, loads of professionals I spoke to talked about how they're constantly out there working the room, doing the drinks, doing the events, making sure that they're keeping their relationships active and open, because all of the work that they do is contingent on those relationships. And so what I call this is sort of the network constellation that exists within a policy value chain and within a city or a region. And what's really fascinating about this is that the social capital, the relationships that these people have, converts to cultural capital, because that's where they get their information. So they use the relationships that they have to feed in to the information that they need about what is it that makes the city tick, what's new, what's hot, what should we be talking about. They use the relationships with stakeholders to understand what the new trends are that are happening within that place so that they can tell better stories. So this is a really important sort of idea of thinking around where these relationships sit. And in terms of cultural capital, now, if you want to, I'm happy to send any of you my peer-reviewed journal papers on this stuff, because it can get a little theoretical sometimes. But what we have here is called the circuit of culture. And this is where culture starts to be created. And what I've done here is I've talked about how in the articulations of production, consumption, regulation, identity, and representation, these people, professionals like yourselves, are working behind the scenes, again, in unofficial and non-systemic ways, to influence politicians and decision makers upstream, and also having a major impact on media discourse downstream. And they do this behind the scenes. And so again, the paper outlines the various ways that they maneuver and they work behind the scenes, sometimes in manipulative ways, to essentially get the brand out in front and to transcend those political cycles. So again, what we talk about is this idea of influencing upstream. What this means is that there are subtle, unofficial ways of working with politicians and decision makers to get them to sort of see your perspective in terms of the brand. I had a lot of people talk to me about the fact that they needed to make the politicians aware, or let the politicians think that they were in front of an initiative, for example. So because the politician's goal is to get reelected, or the politician's goal is to get out in front and look like they are winning. And so the marketers were very sort of canny about saying, sure, no problem. Yeah, this is your idea. You take this, knowing full well that there was a massive amount of work that was going on behind the scenes, but they needed to put the politician out in front in order to get the buy-in from the political class. There's lots of other ways that they talked about in terms of adapting brand policies to look like they fit with electoral policies, to make sure the politicians could see where they could see themselves fitting into that. So I'm sure, judging by nodding heads and your response, that a lot of you are saying, yeah, we've had to do that. This is part of the job. But again, it's not necessarily a codified or formal function of the job, but we all know that it exists. We also know that you really need to leverage that deep understanding of place in order to feed it up the policy value chain, and that the social capital, as I said, is one of the most important tools in terms of bringing those disparate actors together, where nobody else other than the marketers are actually able to bring those different players into the room. They can. And what I talk about is this idea that you have to operate as an honest broker. You're there representing the brand for the public good, but there's a lot of brokering that needs to happen again behind the scenes in order to make it happen. And again, what we're seeing in the research and the new direction of this is that this need to sort of articulate social, cultural, and economic value that actually shows that it enhances well-being and sustainability. And I know sustainability is a major theme of this conference, and I would argue that actually this is where this work can really have a major impact, is starting to centralize notions of sustainability and well-being as indices on which to judge and rank. And I know Brand Finance has included those types of indices in their research as well. And this is a place where marketers can really have an impact in getting those decision makers on board. Then I talk about impact downstream. Now this is really interesting because again, you've got these people who operate at this nexus where they are operating and influencing upstream, but nobody else has as much power over the media discourse and the impact of what people are talking about and sharing as the marketers themselves who are operating the channels. They're the ones who are actually creating the narrative, the public discourse, writing the press releases, writing the social media posts, deciding which photos to post, etc. And they've got access to the platforms that can actually create that exponential awareness digitally. What this means is that they're able to curate and amplify. So you're able to actually decide which images get used, which stories get told, and then amplify them out to larger audiences where they get repeated over time. And I'm reminded of a time when I was in Toronto where this was sort of the beginning of this research for me, when I was walking around the city with about 15 journalists following me all over, and they were all asking me, what is Toronto? What do you do on the weekend? You know, what's great about Toronto? What should we write about? And I had no training in this. I got the job because I had a PR and marketing background and I loved the city. And there I was telling them about my favorite haunts, hidden gems, places to go on the weekend. And then that showed up in their coverage, in the travel media coverage. And then it showed up in social media. And then it got amplified. And next thing I knew, the little hidden spot gem that I loved to go for brunch was overrun with tourists. What, not so lucky for me, but it made me realize the exponential power of that storytelling and how that actually becomes reality in the hands of the marketers who do their jobs well. So why does this matter? Well, again, I want to sort of talk about the fact that, you know, marketers really enjoy this sort of this very invisible but highly influential role in policy and planning decisions. And not nearly enough, but actually at the same time, they do operate in this milieu, and they really need to understand the value and the power that they hold. But over and time again, I'm hearing from marketers like yourselves that they are undermined and undervalued by politicians, by decision makers, by people who think that marketing and branding has no business in the public sector, or that it operates under very different sort of constrictions. There's a real lack of an understanding about the influence and the impact that is inherent in the role, and the ability for people to actually have such a major impact on the way that the story and the policies of a place are actually created and determined. And what I want to argue is that if we actually centralize the marketing function and we actually create this opportunity for people who work in those roles to have more strategic insight and impact into policy value chains, it will equal better places. And again, if you look at the corporate models, corporations now very much will have a CMO sitting at the table with the CEO and COO as a part of the major strategic team, where decisions do not get made without market insight in the room. And I would argue that places need to actually embed that thinking as well in order to become the better places of the future. Oh, I'm not sure why it's not going. I do have just a couple more slides. There we go. So some implications for you as practitioners that maybe you can start to think about in terms of thinking about your roles differently. First is that if you start to develop a sociocultural perspective of the profession, not just thinking about it in terms of its practicalities, but actually thinking about it in terms of its sociocultural impact on societies, then you can start to really understand the power of what we call cultural intermediation. What this means is that it's about leveraging your social and cultural capital, keeping your network strong, keeping your relationships active, and also constantly learning and upskilling so that you're always on the cutting edge of where you need to be for the job. Making sure that you're demonstrating influence and impact in your roles through metrics, through various means of talking about the work, being out in front of it, making sure that you're positioning it strongly for those political leaders so that they can understand the economic and social impact of the job. as well as really starting to promote the idea that you should have a seat at the table in terms of governance and policy planning decisions. And ultimately what this means is that this will also allow you to have a bigger impact on what we call promoting the anti-fragility of places, which is actually getting places ready for the future shocks that could occur in terms of sustainability and climate action. And this, for me, is where the real magic of the work can occur. The other thing you can do is consider pathways to professionalization. Now, again, when I was starting out on my academic journey 10 years ago in this field, there was very little that I could, there were no courses available, there were no training available that I could take to ready myself for this. And also, when I was working in the field, I was struck by the fact that there was no training I could have taken to help me do that job better. So that's what led me to start the master's degree in place branding at Middlesex. It's an online degree, 1 year, where we basically cover a lot of this stuff, and we do cover all of the realms of the things that relate to both policy planning and marketing of places. And then also think about taking some short courses that are available out there as well, and potentially looking for some CPD accreditation. And so, again, sort of just food for thought and discussion, this idea that, it's not really Machiavellian. it's not as manipulative as that. But I do think that there's sort of this notion that we do need, as marketers, we need to see ourselves as being masters of our domain, a little bit stronger, understand the power and the influence that this job holds, and really reflect on where that sits in the policy value chain. And by thinking about it in terms of these sociocultural terms, you can actually start to unpack the power and the influence that you can have on actually making better places for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Janina. If we call the place brand managers Machiavellian, I dread to think what we should be saying about us consultants. But very informative lecture, and please do contact Janina if you'd like to sign up to the next round of the MA in place branding. As you can see, not just very insightful, but also very concise, and she's able to squeeze her lecture into half the time allocated. And the next session will be on brand Bhutan. Could we please invite Lisa, Julian, and Mr. Dorji Draddle to the stage? The Making of Brand Bhutan, how Bhutan built a future-forward brand that honors the past and present by carrying them into the future. We will start with a short presentation by Lisa and Julian about the new brand for Bhutan, Bhutan Believe. It's very inspirational. There's a booth there if you want to learn more about the brand, how it came to be and what it represents. And we'll then launch into a panel discussion, fireside discussion between Mr. Dorji Draddle, Department of Tourism, Royal Government of Bhutan, the Director General, all the way from this wonderful Asian country, who will be interviewed by David Haigh, the Chairman and CEO of Brand Finance again.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Conrad.
Here is the clicker.
Very good morning to everyone here, and it's really a big opportunity and honor for our team from Bhutan to be part of this. And thank you, Brand Finance, David, and your team, and also the sponsors for making this possible. And also I'd like to acknowledge the value of this soft power, because without such a resource as a soft power like small nations like Bhutan, I think we will have no place in this big world. So I think as we have already have enough examples in the past, I think even if you are a small country or a small economy, you can still be a leader. You can still lead, the world. Also the other bigger economies through these resources such as a soft power. And of course, we will be focusing our presentation on the Bhutan Believe, how this was developed. And before that, I just wanted to say a few things. Basically, even in Bhutan, we are so blessed. And of course, everybody of us here will also agree that we believe in leadership. I think at the end of the day, I think whether it is an organization, whether it is a country, I think the future and how it performs would depend solely, mostly majoritarily on the quality of the leadership. And Bhutan, I would like to inform that we have been so fortunate to have such a visionary, enlightened leadership in our kings. And so as a part of this, when the whole world was undergoing through this crisis of COVID-19, and Bhutan also was forced to be closed for almost like 2.5 years. But what has happened is, again, through the enlightened leadership of His Majesty the King, we have actually taken the adage quote, which says, "Don't let a good crisis to go to a waste." And it is being attributed, I mean, coincidentally, to Sir Winston Churchill of here. And we took that very seriously. And so for 2.5 years, actually, we were trying to see, I mean, how we can change. I mean, once we come out of this COVID, we should come out as a different nation. So basically, we took that as a moment of evolution. And as one of the major output of that 2.5 years COVID crisis, the development of the new brand Bhutan, which is known as Bhutan Believe. I mean, that has happened. So with this, I think we will go straight into the presentation. Yeah, so as I said, I mean, this is the brand Bhutan. While we have engaged in external experts like Julian and Lisa, they were in the country to help us to come up with this new brand for our country. But of course, thorough consultation, the views of the population, the citizens across the levels, across the population, they have been consulted. So therefore, this brand, Bhutan Believe, definitely comes from our people. It basically reflects about our values, our aspirations, and also more importantly, the transformation that we are looking forward to. So at this point in time, of course, the nation itself is so much in an excitement because we are really talking about transforming and to show to the world that maybe there is a different way of living a life in this world, and basically not only just for yourself, for your country, but for the people and the planet. That presently we are all confronted with the various challenges. Thank you. Yeah, and the brand is actually not for tourism. Of course, I work as the Director General of Tourism, so I represent tourism. But then this Bhutan Believe is a nation brand. Is not a tourism brand, but of course we have been at the forefront as far as the usage of this brand is concerned. Yeah, I think we can move on. Yeah, so yes. Okay, now maybe Lisa can continue.
So now we'll move on to a deep dive into the launch campaign of Bhutan Believe. We'll dissect a few of the elements, the photography, the patterns, the colors, and the new brand Bhutan. There was a declaration to the world when the country opened in September 2022. We'll also go into the brand logo and the Believe tagline. So the new brand Bhutan, the tagline is Believe. This is what it looks like in some of the campaigns. It's a lockup with the logo Bhutan and then the tagline Believe. So the essential attributes of a tagline in nation building, it has to be robust, and there are some elements that are very important. Simplicity, because it's easy to understand. Utility, it's easy to use. Permanence, you can be used for years. It reflects the brand promise, that is that unspoken soul of the brand. It's emotive, so it appeals to feelings. And it's memorable, it makes a lasting impression. And it's an extension of the nation's ambition. So it's a call to action. Believe. So this new brand Bhutan uses a single and clear and a strong word, believe. And believe actually builds on the ideas and values of gross national happiness and becomes a rallying cry to friends, all of us, at home and abroad. So people did ask, especially within Bhutan, like, why believe? So we have a number of answers to that, and I think it will be clear then why it is also so powerful as a nation brand, but also as a being used in tourism. It aspires. So Bhutan forges a unique path in the world. Believe invokes for our fellow citizens and for friends beyond the borders an aspiration towards another way of being in the world. And and other definitions of progress. So we believe in a genuinely unique Bhutanese way of life and its unique value. It inspires. It serves as an inspiring call to action for the nation. It's an invitation for the citizens to rise to the challenge and not lose sight of a shared vision through this time of transformation, which of course we'll get into more details about what that looks like. And we believe it can be achieved. It's youth-focused. Even though the kingdom is still steeped in its history, it really is gazed and fixed on the future. It is not leaving the past. There is a thread between the past, present, and the future, and it's quite harmonious. It ensures opportunities for young people and to find it in their own country. It is also a rallying cry to believe in the country for the young people, that there is a bright future and that they are part of it. It's bold, one word, believe. The nation is undertaking this truly evolutionary step, this leap, and it has to be powered by self-belief. Each citizen and collectively, everybody has to embody that. And so belief says this is a big moment also to the outside world. Watch what we're doing. It invokes trust. It sends a strong message to the world. Believe in us. And then also Bhutan can be dependable and deliver on its promises. And Bhutan's going through this remarkable journey and really inviting the world to join the country, join Bhutan on this journey. And it's limitless. I mean, believe is simple and it's easy to remember, but it's really packed with complexity and possibilities for personal and collective interpretation. And this is very important, that each citizen, each person, each visitor can craft their own story about believe. It's a toolkit that allows for all these possibilities, these stories, plus collective interpretation. It's active, it's a verb. So it has the power to move with you in the world and with the country. And it can lead the way, but it's a guiding force, but it really has the potency to be next to any individual as they move forward. And it has a potency to inspire dreams. And it's magical. Unbelievable actually is a word that when people know Bhutan, they think of that word. They're always saying that to describe what they find there, the beauty, the culture, and the people. So there is an element of magic. So it's not, so it embodies that as well. It has room for that to live in that space. And the magic of the folklore, the traditions, the landscape, and the policy making, this very future-forward policy making. So definitely within Bhutan, at the time that this was being unveiled, people asked, believe in what? So believe in the future, believe in ourselves, believe in elevated values, and believe in our worth, believe in nature, also believe in a just and harmonious society, and then believe that there's another path in the world, and that is uniquely Bhutanese. And this is something that Bhutan has always done in the world. It always has its very unique way of approaching things.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. As you've seen at the beginning on the campaign, the launch of the Brand Bhutan was also the opportunity to launch a whole new toolkit, which included a lot of visual elements as well. We're going to take you through a few of these visual elements. The first one, the logo. So you can see it here in all capitals, strong, bold, Bhutan word mark. It is used with the lock-up believe, as you'll see it around here at the stand, but it's also used in other contexts as the single word mark. So one thing that is really important to know about Bhutan is that a lot of people who have low awareness of the country will see it as a place which is remote and mystical and think about the nature, but it's also a very technologically advanced country which is investing massively in that sector. DG Dorji will talk more about that later, but it was important for us that our brand identity was suited for this digital world, which takes shape in many, many different forms in Bhutan. Also, it exists within a complete toolkit. In the past in Bhutan, a lot of the brand identity was relying on a single logo and not an entire brand and graphic toolkit, which has been now developed. So it is bold and confident. It's grounded in time-honored traditions and a majestic landscape, which is quite important to the country. It is also contemporary and clear, clean lines. It's really wanted to convey a future-facing nation, not just time-honored tradition. It is traditional and warm. You will see this gentle curves. It is really an extension of the warmth and welcoming character of the Bhutanese people. And then, as I mentioned, it is legible, scalable, and as well as responsive and functional across a lot of different applications. And then, if you've seen the campaign, you'll notice that it's very different from other nation branding campaign for international audiences. It is very copy heavy. It's not just a tagline and beautiful photos of the place. So the campaign launched with this declaration to the world. After 2.5 years, what do we want to say to international audiences? And it was really about opening people's eyes about this new era of transformation. So it reintroduced itself, to the world in this international campaign, and it has this bold statement encapsulating the country's pride, progress, and plans. What we wanted to do with this is to lead conscious traveler away from their preconceptions and build new awareness around the country's progressiveness and the ambitions. Formally as well, it's been written in English, but using the lyrical flow of Lozi and Darshi, which are part of the kingdom's rich oral tradition. You have the declaration to the world here. I won't read it because it really does come from a Bhutanese voice, so later, before the fireside chat, DG Dorji will read it. And then colors as well. You can see here that it's not a single color or two colors, but a really rich color world, which if people have been to Bhutan will have noticed that actually it is a very colorful place with a lot of ornaments painted on all of the houses, which is a very important of artistic expression in the countries. We have primary colors, which integrate the official colors of Bhutan, Bhutan yellow, Bhutan orange, but also natural soot from the heart and fireplaces of the Bhutanese home. It also has secondary color palette, which was found in the National Library. Those are traditional pigments that have been used for centuries. And then the introduction as well of a third color palette, which we've called super colors, which are meant to convey this future-facing nation that is leapfrogging right now and in the middle of that era of transformation. I think it's important to say as well that we spend months in Bhutan researching, traveling from the west of the country to the east, meeting with people from all walks of life, all professions, but also documenting a lot what we found in the country to make sure, as DG Dorji said, that everything that was part of the brand was found in the country and co-created with the country as well. So here you have ornaments. None of this is new, actually. It's centuries old, but it's been reimagined with these super colors and digital precision. Same thing for the 8 auspicious symbols, which have been given a bold and graphic reworking, and the mythical animals found in Buddhism. And so from these 2 patterns were created, one called Contemporary Constellations, which reminds us of the night sky in Bhutan, one of the most beautiful, least light polluted places in the world, where you have such a privilege to see the stars. And so all of these symbols are used in this pattern, as well as Future Folk, which is telescoping the viewer right into the pattern and abstracting some of the auspicious symbols and some of the mythical animals, giving us a completely new take, a very, very contemporary take on them. And then photography as well. Of course, we had beautiful landscapes as part of this campaign, but we also had a huge focus on the youth, which was really important. When we arrived there, the youth were undergoing a visionary skilling program. There were, many of them engage in learning all sorts of different skills, and the youth are really the vision and at the core of the transformation. So when the campaign launched, the brand photography was really showcasing the youth of the country, which, with a median age of 26 years old, it's a really young country. And the young people are connected to the world on social media, education, and travel. So we wanted to convey this youthful energy and vitality. But also because the youth possess all the values of the past and the present. They are very connected to the heritage and the past of the country, but also very future-looking. And then so taken together, all of the brand elements become this living, breathing embodiment of the nation, of the Bhutanese and their values.
Yeah, so the brand basically represents, these are the key values, like we are ambitious, and at the same time we want to act with integrity and humility, and we are aware of our challenges, but at the same time we are committed to overcoming them. We seek to preserve our traditions, but move forward and nurture innovations, and we are adventurous in our thinking and dependable in our delivery. So these are the key brand values.
So I'll speak a little bit about the sustainable development fee, because this is a topic that comes up regularly, and it's very important that it is. DG can talk a bit more about it, that it, number one, is called a sustainable development fee, and it always has been called that. And what it does, so it enables investment in transformative programs and is able to sustain cultural traditions, and protect the environment, and upgrade infrastructure and build in resilience. So it is, it supports, the training of youth and mentorship, and it's a critical investment to the country. So being, as a visitor, it is a gesture of belief in the ambitions and the capacity to achieve them in Bhutan. And the way I'll go in a little bit further, that it is collected and it's thought about in a responsible and transparent and dependable and trustworthy manner. That is at the core of the sustainable development fee, and really says who Bhutan is, and inviting a partnership. And basically, it is actually found, you can go into the Bhutanese constitution and understand exactly where the fees will go and how it'll be used. So it goes that deep. And in Article 14 of the Constitution, it mandates that all taxes and fees and levies, which include the SDF, are deposited into what is called a consolidated account. This is a general account, and it is mandated that it must cover government recurrent expenditure, ensure the stability and reliability of government operations, and any residual revenue from this account is allocated to very specific developmental activities, which includes the building of, supporting the growth and training of human capital, which is so important into Bhutan. So building schools, providing free health care, skilling youth, maintaining forests, and then providing fresh drinking water and renovating and very important cultural songs and other initiatives. So in short, a lot of people might say, oh, why, I'll give this money, but they want to have a special interest, that money to go to a special interest. But no, actually, it is mandated by the Constitution that these contributions, again, go into recurring expenses, which includes salaries, interest payments that the government needs to pay on loans. It's to maintain stable and an operational government. And then again, the extra any residual can actually also be found, because every 5 years Bhutan has a 5-year plan. So you can actually see the 5-year plan and see where any of that residual revenue that comes in will be used. So it's very transparent, it's very structurally embedded, and this is very important. It does not become a special interest. It truly is for the entire nation.
Yeah, so I think a little bit on what Lisa was just talking about, SDF, maybe we are just assuming that you all know this, but I'm sure there must be some people here who are not really aware of what SDF means. Basically, this is related to our tourism. Our tourism policy has been guided by the last 50 years, what we call as high value, low volume. So one of the keys, basically in the layman's term, high value, low volume, what it basically means is sustainable tourism. We are pursuing a sustainable tourism, which is based on our development philosophy of gross national happiness, which again prioritizes the balance, pursuance or development of social, economic, environmental, and cultural. So these are the 4 pillars, and that is being reflected in tourism as a high value, low volume. Now, one of the main strategy to implement, to put into action the high value, low volume tourism policy is the implementation of what you call a sustainable development fee. It is a tourism levy. We know that there are many destinations and nations in the world who actually levied tourism, tax. But then ours is a bit different, as was being explained by Lisa. First is, it is being called as a sustainable development fee since when we started this. So sustainable development fee. So the intent and the objective of this fee is very clear and transparent, why we are doing this. Second is, after the post-pandemic, when we reopened to the world, as a part of this brand Bhutan believe, we also made so many changes in tourism. Towards actually making it even more sustainable, making it more regenerative. So towards that, one big thing was enhancing the rate of sustainable development fee. It used to be USD $65 per person per day. If you want to visit as a tourist visitor to Bhutan, that used to be the fee. But and that has been constant for last almost like 30 years. We have not changed this. And as I said, it was a moment for evolution for us during the COVID time. So we said now we need to, it's a high time that we need to increase. So therefore, when we reopened in 2022, we increased it to 200, almost like 4 times of what it used to be. So 200 USD per person as a sustainable development fee. And this doesn't include, this is just as a fee. You don't get anything else for that. For rest of your expenses, you have to pay an extra, plus. So we became the highest kind of tourism levy in the world as of today. But now, because of the situation, as of now, we have actually discounted it to 50%. Now it is 100 USD per person per day, and till 2027. So therefore, it is such a unique thing and something that we are really serious about. Bhutan is really serious about sustainable development, gross national happiness. Yeah, so I'll stop this. And now, as a part of transformation, as a part of Bhutan belief, these are some key things that are already unfolding in our country. As I speak here, in fact, it's very recent, just about a month or 2 months ago, during the National Day celebration. We celebrate our National Day on 17 December every year. And 116th National Day we have just celebrated. There, His Majesty, one of the key highlights of the National Day celebration is His Majesty addresses the nation. So in that address, for the first time, he announced to the nation saying that we are launching what we call as the Gyalifu Mindfulness City. It is around like 1,000 square kilometer area has been designated in the southern part of the country between two big the national parks, and that is going to be a special administrative region, and first of its kind in the world. It's not, of course, we have so many examples when you talk about SAR, like we are talking about Dubai, Singapore, but what we are seeing, or Hong Kong, but we are saying it is not going to be like any one of them. It is going to be first of kind in the world, and basically the major 4 tenets that we are going to focus on this new mindfulness city is basically, there are 4 tenets. First is mindfulness and well-being. Second is nature and sustainability. Third tenet is values and wisdom. And then the 4th tenet is growth and innovation. So these are the 4 key tenets that will guide the development of this Gyalifu Mindfulness City. And at this point in time, basically what we are trying to achieve from this will be, we are going to show to the world that there is an alternative way, a Bhutanese way to live more sustainably, to make it more friendly, for the people and for the future of the earth. So this is what we are trying to do. And at this point in time, actually, I also like to take this opportunity in offering this invitation to anyone here, everyone who wants to support our our aspirations and our dreams guided by this Bhutan belief, and we like to have this open invitation. Anyone who wants to invest there, be part of this new transformation that we have embarked on, and basically it is we are talking about a like-minded investors as individuals or as an organization. And these are already, for more information, these are already on the website, and also as a part of this, we have just last week, in fact, we have just launched a digital bank. And in fact, that is now supposed to be the first full reserve bank in Asia. And we have just launched this called Oro Bank, and this bank is being dedicated to develop this mindfulness city in our country. And anybody can have access to this, actually. And then the other thing is that, as our earlier speaker, Dr. Warren has informed, I think, University of Middlesex, I think they are offering a new courses like in the place branding master, even in Bhutan. Of course, ours is a very small university, but even, when you're talking about innovation, going futuristic, we are also started to offer a bachelor's degree in, like, for example, blockchain technology, cryptocurrency. So these are already we are starting. We are a small country, we are, yet to be, developed, but what we are trying to say is we are also futuristic, we are also being innovative. While we want to protect our culture and tradition, but at the same time, we really want to go forward. And then, of course, as a news again, this September, in fact, on September 19, starting from a week from September 19, Bhutan is going to host for the first time Bhutan International Film Festival. So you all are welcome there. If you want to come and enjoy this festival. And then, of course, I think this is a very, again, interesting news. In fact, just while I was sitting there, I was just checking my inbox, and I saw a news saying that Bhutan has been awarded an award for innovation and identity in Barcelona, I think, just this week, I think. And for this, what we have called as the self-sovereign national digital identity. We launched this last year, just about a year ago, and Bhutan has become the first country to roll out such a self-sovereign national identity. So we are really going digital also. And in fact, our Crown Prince has become, he was the first national digital identity citizen. So basically so many things are actually happening, and we really want to thank the organizers here. It's such a great opportunity for us to share this, and also really want to acknowledge that the resources such as soft power is really good for everyone, but particularly for small countries like Bhutan. Thank you. Maybe we'll stop it. I think, David, I think we are taking too much time.
Okay.
Yeah, if you like, I can read this. So this is a declaration to the world when we launched this, our brand Bhutan Believe. So what we are saying is the kingdom is steeped in history, but our gaze is fixed on the future. This is our moment of evolution. Guardians of some of the world's most pristine, wild, and sacred places, and of a rich, deeply rooted culture, we are steadfast in the cypress in our commitment to our conservation. Cypress is our national tree, by the way. And our future requires us to protect our heritage and to forge fresh pathways for forthcoming generations. We are always talking about future generation, actually. It's not just for present generation, we are talking about future generation. Those who seek us out are called here, especially the visitors, the guests. Arriving as a guest, you become our partner in transformative moment and make a meaningful contribution towards preserving what is priceless. We see a bright future, and we believe in our ability and responsibility to realize it together and shine as a beacon of possibility in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So I think we're going to sit here and have a little chat. That's the idea. Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes of questions for the refreshment break, so I hope I won't keep you for too long. It's very obvious that Bhutan is an extremely innovative country. And obviously that must be reflected in the population that is very well educated and very smart, and probably, no doubt, from the king downwards. The question that I really want to ask is, you mentioned the 5-year plan,
Yes.
And I'm interested in focusing on the economics of all of this, because Bhutan is very small, and no doubt your resources are quite limited, and yet you're trying to get a message out to the whole world to come to you. So I'm fascinated to know how you marshal the resources to get the message out, to maximize the returns. And you know, the Gross National Happiness Index, that's such a brilliant idea. Where did that come from?
Yeah, actually, the gross national happiness is a development philosophy which we have adopted, practiced for the last, I think, 40, 50 years. And in fact, this came from our fourth king. We are presently under fifth king. So in fourth king in early 70s, when I think when he was actually being interviewed in India while he's traveling in India by some reporter, journalist, what is the GDP of your country? It seems he was asked that question, but at that point in time, Our Majesty instantly, he answered that in Bhutan, GDP, gross domestic product, is not important for us. Gross national happiness is important. So since then, it was taken forward.
He was obviously a genius natural PR man.
I agree.
Because, that is the sort of thing that has resonance. And, you see it frequently, and journalists really like it. I don't know how much you put behind that, but it's clearly a very strong thing. And many of the other initiatives you're doing there show a great deal of innovation. So with your 5-year plan, what I was interested in knowing is, what do you expect to generate from the plan, from all of this activity, particularly from tourism? And how are you proposing to then reinvest that in order to keep it rolling in? Because you must have many, many choices as to where you can spend that money. You mentioned the SDF was being used for good works within Bhutan. Is it all being spent within Bhutan, or is it being used to prime more revenue, more visitors, more FDI from outside Bhutan?
No, totally agree, yes. While major revenues we use for our own national development activities, like social welfare. For example, we still provide free education and free health services to all citizens. So likewise, of course, now, especially I think is about the soft power. Now, when you talk about Bhutan, believe through, of course, we didn't really have an organized kind of a brand before COVID. But after COVID, during COVID, as I said, it was a moment of evolution, transformation for us. So we learned this. Now we are really going to take advantage of this. Of course, in the past, I think the soft power was happening on its own, actually, by kind of a default. Like, for example, His Majesty saying the statement, then the concept of JNH became so widespread, popular, but it was not really designed and intended. So it was just happening on its own. But now we know, we know the value and the potential that soft power can have. So therefore, we are actually now going to embark on this in a very proper, planned way to take advantage of this.
There are various different media for promoting anything.
Yes.
And advertising is a great one, but it's extremely expensive. And if you try and do it on a global level, it's going to be very expensive. The next best is organic social media. It looks like you're growing an industry of people who are capable of doing that from within Bhutan. Is that the idea? You grow a cadre of people who can get the message out there at a lower cost.
That's also true. At this point in time, as a part of transformation, we are doing a lot of reskilling and upskilling of our population. I think that has been, again, one of the major shortcomings. While in terms of education, in terms of literacy, in terms of English, we are quite okay. But really, when you talk about the real skills, real capacity, these are still something that we are lacking, and we are at this point in time really trying to upskill, including what you have just highlighted, the soft skills. Yes.
This is the first year that Bhutan has appeared in our study, and with all the small countries of the world, there is a universal problem that they may be very, very unique, have a great proposition, and so on, and a few of them do, apart from Bhutan. But they all suffer from the same problem, which is that when you research, you very often find people have never even heard of them.
Yes.
And so it's an awareness challenge. And they say that, obviously, with marketing funnels, you have what they call it, the marketing funnel that begins with awareness. So it seems to me that is the primary challenge for Bhutan and other countries, which, I don't know whether you'd like to comment on that, how you overcome that challenge.
No, so I really want to take this opportunity thanking Brand Finance, David, yourself, for this time, for the first time including Bhutan in this soft power index. And of course, just now we really don't know what is the outcome. But regardless of whatever is the outcome, whatever is the ranking that Bhutan is given, the fact that it's been included is such a big thing for us. I mean, especially for tourism. I mean, I don't represent the whole country as such. I just represent tourism. And wherein, as I said earlier, we are at the forefront when we use the soft power or the brand, we are the front person. So therefore, this, by including in this, of course, later on when we see what is exactly happening there, what are the informations that are being shared, have been put together, that is really going to be a big boost for us. I mean, it will be big help for especially for tourism and how we can further leverage our marketing or promotion or whatever thing that we wanted to do. So we really take this as a great opportunity, and thank you so much for Brand Finance.
Well, actually, in the audience today, we have representatives from Costa Rica. There we are. And the interesting thing about Costa Rica, it's another small country, but in the Americas, which focused for many years on sustainable tourism, and so is very, very famous for that. But that's now spilled over into a very successful FDI program, because people want to go to such a lovely country to work and so on. And it sounds like you're going down the same track. I just wonder, how do you reconcile the balance between, when you look at Bhutan, it's a beautiful, dreamy, perfect place that is not developed, and it's quite hard to get to it. How do you reconcile that with an FDI strategy?
Now, yes, it's true. I mean, maybe in a way we are following what Costa Rica is doing. But at the same time, as I said, the Gulf Mindfulness City, while this is, to start with, it is going to be a special administrative region. It will have its own laws. It will have its own rules. So for any investor, parties who want to be part of this, will have a totally different, it is not part of Bhutan. Of course, it is Bhutan, but then rest of the Bhutan will have its own, the existing law. So therefore, but while I have also shared and offered this invitation, welcome for anybody interested to be part of this new city, mindfulness city, we will be very careful. I mean, what type of, not anybody investor. We are just not talking about money here. Let's say Mr. A, I mean, company A wants to invest this many $1 million there. We will not just immediately accept this. We have to undergo through a lot of checklists, and the key will be they show, whoever wants to be part of this has to respect and believe in what we are trying to do. And what we are trying to do is basically is not just for Bhutan. We want to make a model for the rest of the world to follow, basically saying that this is a new way of living more sustainably, living more mindfully. And also I just wanted to add here that before this Bhutan Believe took over, tourism, we had our own destination brand, which used to be represented by, visually by blue poppy flower, which is our national flower, blue poppy flower, with the tagline, happiness is a place. But now for the time being, because of this Bhutan Believe, we have left that aside, set that aside for a while, and because the reason is, happiness is, while under the development philosophy of gross net happiness, we are talking of happiness, but now we have realized happiness also, I think there's a way of being happy. So we want now this happiness also to be a mindfully happiness.
So what kind of businesses and things are you expecting to come to the Mindfulness City? I mean, are you expecting Brand Finance to set up there?
Yes, why not? Yes. So actually in the Mindfulness City, while the way of doing a business will be different, it will be value-based, it will be futuristic and sustainable-based, regenerative, but the business itself, it can be anything. For example, we could have a luxury brands being established here. We could have a finance, banking, world-class, financial hub can be there. We can have a, the big, the world standard class kind of a medical facilities can be there. People can come there for medical treatment. We can have a universities there. We are already, I think, talking with the Oxford and Cambridge and with this university. At the highest level, there are already some dialogues are going on. So we could have a college, off-site campus of a University of Oxford or, for example, Cambridge. So it is going to be, in terms of the possibility of the businesses, enterprises, it can be anything actually. The only difference is that the way we do this, it will be different. It will be, I think I need to highlight this, it will be based on mainly on the principles of the Vajrayana Buddhism, because as of now, Bhutan is still considered as the last place where we have this so-called, is a different kind of philosophy, principle called Vajrayana Buddhism, and we are still practicing this in the country, and this city will be actually that will be the key element. The values, we are going to involve this spiritualism. In fact, that is going to be the key one. So business-wise, like for brand finance can be there. So maybe, I don't know, the way you operate there could be a little bit different. I don't know.
Final question before coffee, which is about, you mentioned ambassadors.
Yes.
And, you take George Clooney with Dos Amigos, or whatever they're called, his tequila brand. It went from nowhere to being $1 billion brand because George Clooney supported it. Presumably, you're trying to attract people like him to come to Bhutan to be ambassadors. I mean, is that a thing within the program?
Yes, definitely, I'm sure. But we have not really highlighted this part as of now. But here, when you talk about ambassador, it was mainly at our tourism,
at your level.
Yeah, at our tourism level. So we are seeing, we view, in fact, as a part of transformation, I think maybe that should be my final sentence, remark. We have actually changed the way we look at our visitor. We are actually intentionally trying to discourage the use of the word tourist. We feel the word tourist is not appropriate. It is more of a commercial, it is kind of impersonal. So therefore, we are intentionally trying to discourage the use of the word tourist. We view, a prospective visitor to Bhutan as a visitor before they enter our country. Once they enter our country, they become our guest. And then once they depart our country, after having seen our country, we aspire them to live as our siblings, as our brothers and sisters, at the individual level, and at the national level, we want to aspire them to be our ambassadors. So, and also not only that, we hope to establish this intergenerational relationship with our guests.
So, have you invited Cristiano Ronaldo or Taylor Swift yet?
Not yet. I
think you should.
Yes. If you can afford, as of now, I think they are very expensive. I think that will make
they'll come to get a bit of mindfulness, won't they?
Yes.
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David.
Thanks for the presentation. Coffee is now served.